when a cycle ends, the psychology ends, if that makes sense. And the chart I just showed you, the psychology of a market, is basically screaming the end of an era, the midnight hour. The midnight hour would be the change from one psychology of an up cycle to a down cycle. So if the markets are plunging in 2024, what's going on in the world? I know for a fact that I kept hearing midnight hour, midnight hour, midnight hour. I kept hearing that over and over and over again. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a very special podcast. This is an end of year 2023 podcast. Probably my last podcast that I'm going to be doing this year. And I get to be again with, I think it's the third time with Andy Schectman. I got to say, what a privilege. I actually emailed you yesterday or texted you and say, hey, can you do an emergency broadcast? Because that's really what this is, an emergency broadcast before year end. I just wanted the viewers to have a little bit so we can dive into where we're at right now as the year is ending. And in my opinion, how critical this time is. Those of you who like our podcasts, Andy and I are going to chat, probably doing some more regular interviews going into the future, particularly next year. Please like and subscribe this. Secondly, I'm telling you, you're going to absolutely love the content we're going to talk about today. So take this interview and share it across to everybody you potentially know as email contacts, friends, family, even to your brokers, because they're going to want to know what the heck's about to go on from a biblical perspective and a cycles perspective that we have going on in the world right now. So sorry for the long intro. God bless you, Andy, and thank you for being here.
Well, God bless you too, brother. It is great to be here. I hope you had a great Christmas and a happy, healthy New Year on the horizon. You know, the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. I have a real distinct feeling that this coming year is going to be, let's just call it, rather interesting. So it will be an honor to ride shotgun with you and watch things unfold on multiple levels. And so it's good to be here with you now and look forward to doing that with you and watching things unfold in what ought to be, I think, the craziest year of my 33-year career.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. So a couple of questions. Well, let's kind of start with this. So first off, anything new going on the gold, silver front that you're hearing right now? Any latest updates?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, but what's interesting to me, Bo, is that there's almost zero hype about gold, while you got GLD, the precious metals gold ETF, hitting all-time highs yesterday or the day before. And then on December 27th, you had the London benchmark, the gold price benchmark, hit an all-time high of 2,069.40 per ounce at their afternoon auction, the London PM fix. And, I find it very interesting that you have gold and silver roaring, in particular gold really leading the way. And that's common too. Very often when we see the metals move, we see gold go first and then silver will slingshot. And on a percentage.
If I could just pause you for a minute, you're exactly right. So from a cycles perspective, gold's always the first. If this is a racetrack, it's the first one out of the racetrack, first one out of the gates. And then silver does this insane job of playing catch up. And what that is a narrowing of the ratio. So it's going to go from a ratio of, we talked about last time in the 80s, and it's going to keep dropping that ratio down because it's going to accelerate and outperform gold. Please continue.
Yeah. And so, one of the trends that I think we'll see next year is the emergence of the credibility of the Shanghai Gold Exchange on a more national level. We're seeing, or international level. We're seeing the LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Association. They're going to start to price a contract based off the Shanghai Gold Exchange prices. And what does that mean? Well, it's fairly significant because they're turning up the heat, if you will, in China. They're trying, I believe, to arbitrage all of the commodities across the globe that way. And as an example, the closing price of silver on the CME, which is the Chicago Board of Trade, on the 27th was 24.31. The same time in Shanghai was 26.50, $2.19 an ounce higher. We've seen gold as high as $150 higher per ounce priced in Shanghai than in London or in the COMEX. This is a big, big deal. because I think what it is signaling is that the exchanges or the price setting mechanism of the world, largely the LME and the COMEX, are being questioned, and I think the folks that are questioning it already know the answer, and yet what they are doing by slowly turning up the heat and raising the price that they're willing to pay for gold and silver over the Western benchmark price is really significant, and I think they'll, instead of really cranking it up and say, just send us all your gold and silver, we'll take it. They're doing it slowly, allowing things to be done in a methodical fashion. And I have to believe that $2,000 appears to be the new support for gold. It used to be the record high. And the fact that we're now building support near what used to be massive resistance from a technical standpoint, it's a very bullish technical indicator. And I guess I'd like to, as we're wrapping up 2023 here, looking back at gold, I think it did really well. Look, I think it should be much higher. I think it should be a lot higher. I think ultimately it will be, but it held up really well despite the rate hikes that were supposed to be very bearish for gold, as real interest rates have moved up, even though the metrics by which we gauge real interest rates is somewhat, let's just call it blurred from reality. It's a nice way of saying it. But the bottom line is, looks like the Fed's done raising rates, at least for now. I think the market will raise rates in and of themselves later in this cycle. But right now, imagine how well gold will do when they start to pivot. If indeed they do lower rates, it ought to really take off to the races. And it's not that they're signaling a victory over inflation. I think it's capitulation over inflation. They're giving up on it because they're kind of darned if they do and darned if they don't, in the respect that, yeah, they'd like to get tougher on inflation, but with all of the debt in the banking system and the government debt, if they keep turning up the heat on the interest rate market, they're going to blow up the whole system. And even worse, create an event where the Fed is actually unable to meet its obligation, or the government rather is unable to meet its obligations. Next year alone, Bo, do you realize that we have about $10 trillion in bonds that come due that we have to pay? We don't have that money. How do we do it? We have to borrow more money just to pay those obligations, let alone the interest on the debt. And so we're getting to a period of time where I think the legitimacy of gold and silver and no counterparty risk that comes with it is going to really take center stage, because we're getting to the end of this system that has become way out of whack in terms of it being over leveraged and rehypothecated, and a system that was based on trust. And you could argue no one really trusts us anymore. We're beginning to lose the trust globally. So I think owning gold and silver right now has never been more important, not to get wealthy, but because it is wealth that has stood the test of time against everything that was ever thrown against it. And I think what's coming this way now is something that the only thing you could even, I think, begin to equate it to would be something along the lines of the Great Depression, where the standard of living in this country, I think, is going to, which has really been accelerated largely by the good graces of our foreign creditors. Those times are, I believe, ultimately coming to an end. So what gold and silver have offered us all these months and years by being held back by the West to maintain an illusion of Western supremacy in the bond market and the dollar market, well, that I look at it as a subsidy, and I think those subsidies are coming, will be slowly coming to an end. So, yeah, it's things are changing, and you can feel it in the air for sure.
Think about this, right? Everything you just described, from the Fed to the political system, everything, all the entire monetary system that you described, from a cycles perspective, this is the crazy part. What I've shown in prior interviews with regards to the US dollar. So think about this, Andy. All the political events that go on in the world, cumulatively, everything on the charts, therefore and thus creates a pattern. It's called a cycle. Cycle is a wave, okay? So think about the magnitude of this chart that I've shown you, and we've talked with viewers about with regards to gold, the US dollar, and in history. So think about this. 3 years have gone by, Andy. So the historic cycle chart at the very top here, this is 3 years ongoing, from all the way from December of the year 2020 all the way to October, the top on the dollar. And now we've had three drops in the year 2023. We had a final top into cycle point E here in October, which perfect, you got to admit, it's a perfect replica of the historic cycle. And the historic cycle, you get this, I've sent it to you in our private updates. All it shows is the dollar is not stopping going down in the year 2024. So we know that gold and the dollar are two
Inverse.
opposite, they're inverse trades, they're inversely proportional. So if the dollar's going down, gold's going up. So, like you said, we've talked before, and you've said again, you reiterated, I've been saying the roof on gold's 2100. The floor would always come up higher because a bull market always makes higher lows. And so now the floor on gold, so you've got a floor at 2000, you got a
Yeah.
roof at 2100. Talk about narrowing of price. And that's what's going on as we're literally heading into the end of 2023 and what's about to go live here and all the effects of what the BRICS are about to do and the Kim Clement prophecy, which still stands to date. The brothers of Goliath, which are the BRICS nations, stand in glee, means they're happy. Putin was over there high-fiving everybody in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East, the EU, okay? They stand in glee. What are they saying? What was a prophecy? We will cripple you. We will ruin your credit, okay? The dollar is about to plunge. It's going to have a horrific 2024. And if the dollar is going to have a horrific 2024, guess what gold and silver are going to do? They're going to blow the roof off 2100. When it blows the roof on 2100, it's not going to go to 2200. It's probably going to go to 3000, maybe 2500 to 3000 in a single day. Okay. We are talking historic price moves are about to manifest here on this world. But the point I want to illustrate with this chart here, you got to admit 3 years have gone by and this chart's not broken. How crazy is that? It's
It's
not.
actually, it's almost eerie in the respect, and that's one of the things that when I first started talking with you, and you were kind enough to send me your work, really caught my attention. And I think patterns and cycles are they're it they're everywhere you look in nature, and to deny that they are playing out right in front of us here in terms of economics and of monetary policy, I think is a mistake, because you can see it very clear that this is exactly what is happening. And indeed, what's even more spooky is how it lines up prophetically. You put all of this together, and you have to wonder, are there coincidences in life, or are things, maybe a little bit bigger? And sometimes we're fortunate enough to stumble across something and see it for what it truly is. I think it's very difficult to ignore the almost near perfect symmetry in the historical chart versus the dollar, and then of course the antithesis of the dollar, gold, moving nearly symmetrical, only opposite. It's spooky, I guess is how I would put it, in that I guess the old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And this appears to be no different, for sure.
You talk about the word coincidence, right? So from a prophetic or biblical word, what a coincidence is, let me define that. It's when the end is written from the beginning, then all you're seeing is the pieces come together. When the pieces come together, that's a coincidence. So we
Right.
call it a coincidence, but it's actually by design. And so let me tell you, like, so the glory of, so what I showed you there, the 3 year cycle part, I'm just saying God does nothing before first speaking through his servants. I am a servant, and the best definition of what I can give. How would I know to look at a specific cycle pattern? And it's been crazy. It's been crazy accurate. So what's the most recent thing I heard? Okay. Why? Why is this an emergency broadcast? Because I heard something else. The word specifically was midnight hour. Okay. And I want to explain to you what midnight hour is so the viewers can understand and we all can, have it come to understanding what midnight hour is, what's manifesting right in front of us. And so you, just by being on this podcast, you have referenced, I think, 4 or 5 times already, you've said the date of December 27th. Well, I specifically heard the date December 27th, and what it ends up being is not the day of, but the week of. So the week of December 27th is right here, right now. This is the week of December 27th. And the week of December 27th ends today, the 29th, because today is Friday. The markets are closed on Monday, January 1st. They reopen on Tuesday, the 2nd. Let me ask you a question before I show you these charts. Tell us if you know anything about banker commissions, banker year-end bonuses, and why would the bankers try to hold the markets up into year end, into the last day of the year?
Well, I mean, I don't know specifically, but I understand where you're going with it. Certainly, their bonuses would be a byproduct of how they finish the year. And so if things were to collapse into year end, obviously that would have a detrimental effect on their bonuses. So I mean, I think that's probably where you're going with that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you know,
Yeah.
it's also kind of interesting as a side note to that, all of these things converging at once. We have all of the new five BRICS members that as of Tuesday or Monday, rather, January 1st, we'll wake up to it Tuesday morning. We'll have all been fully admitted as full fledged members of the BRICS. So there are a lot of things happening at once, but I think that's what you're getting at is that in the interest of maintaining a bonus or the illusion of strength of portfolio, they are trying their darndest to keep things up heading into the end of the year, so that they walk away with a nice bonus at the end of the year.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to go at with this whole conversation. And so what are we seeing today? Last I checked before we went live on this podcast, and I'm going to try to air this before the markets close so people can whatever they want to do. Well, I'm going to show some charts. People, we're not going to give you anybody financial advice. I'm just showing you what I cycles are screaming or saying right now. People can do whatever they want based on what we show you. But what I'm trying to illustrate is exactly right. They want to prop up the markets into year end, but then what we're seeing right now is Friday, the 29th, the markets are turning down. What's setting up and what is set up right now is a horrific cycle chart pattern. So let me show you what I literally worked this chart up about 2 3 hours yesterday. I wanted to share this with you to show you what's about to happen. Many people have used this chart before. It's called the psychology of a market.
Oh yeah.
Okay. This is what's happening right now from a cycle perspective. At the end of October, we saw the markets run up. Look what they've done. They've ran vertical into the end of the year. We're sitting in euphoria right now. Everything looks fantastic. Happy, happy, joy, joy. But this is the problem. My cycle calculations that I've used all pointed to the 1260-day cycle ended this week. Okay, so the 1260-day cycle goes back 3.5 years. It ended on the 26th, 27th of December. It's over. So the 3.5 year cycle is complete. And that's the cycle that goes literally back to oil going to negative $38 a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
30 days later, the George Floyd, 40 days later, the George Floyd riots break out. Ginsburg dies 150 days later. The 1260-day cycle ended on the 27th, 26th, 27th of December. It's over. Now we got a huge problem. Well, not we, they do. So what's their plan? Because they're still in control. They prop the markets up into year end. They get their bonuses. Okay. And now what they want to do is collapse the system. So what we just had formed is it's called a death run. It's a 1 day down, 6 up. Today's day 6. And then it plunges, which means as the markets open up on Tuesday and all of next week, the US stock markets are collapsing. And this will then lead to 2024, which you're basically restating earlier. You're feeling 2024 is not going to be a good year. Well, this cycle is screaming the exact same thing, that it's going to be a horrific year, 2024, with regards to the US economy. But that's going to be the inverse of what gold and silver is. Now, the other thing is that when we talked the word midnight hour, so if you read Matthew 25, for those who read it, it says the bridegroom was a long time in coming. So this has been taking a long time for all of this to go down. We can all admit, even just the last 4 years, have felt like 20 years, considering what
Yes, they
they've
have.
considering what's been going on, what they've done in the last 4 years. Talk about a long time coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Sound like the world, right? So the world's basically become drowsy and they've fallen asleep. And then at the midnight hour, the cry rang out. So, what's the midnight hour? When you study scriptures, it's a completion point. There's no time left. It's a turning point. Remember the chart I just showed everybody? It's a turning point. It's a new beginning. When the markets turn down, you have a one system end, another one is born. So it's a new beginning. It's the end of an era. It's a cleansing of the old. When darkness, it's a darkness before the dawn. It's when the night turns to day. It's a time point for vengeance. It's when darkness meets light. It's the death of the United States. In my opinion, this will be the death and the fall of Babylon, mystery Babylon. So we're about to see, and that would coordinate perfectly, right, with what you literally just described with regards to who? The BRICS. Because who are the BRICS? The BRICS are specifically, if they take down the US dollar, if they take down this dollar as a world reserve currency, guess what happens? Guess what happens to the control mechanisms? What have they used to control and enslave humanity? What? The US dollar. So it's incredible what this is literally lining up with right now. The dollar is on a bear cycle since October of 2020, I think it was. So the dollar's heading down. It had another top in this past October, and now the US stock markets are heading down. So think about this. The US economy from the US dollar in a down cycle, and now the charts are screaming what I just showed you based on based on the Wall Street cheat sheet. The stock markets just topped. So the US stock markets are finished. There's the end of Babylon. Dollar's finished. And now the stock market's finished. So guess what's about to happen? What do you sell, Andy?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think there's no coincidence that the most well-informed traders on the globe have stockpiled gold to levels that they never have before. Over the last 2 years, they've accumulated more than in the entire history of central banking. And it's not even the fact that they're the most well-funded, they're the most well-informed. They are drawing up in real time the playbook, and they know where this is all heading. And so, yeah, I think you buy gold and silver, Bo, not to get wealthy, but because it has withstood everything the world has ever thrown at it.
To pause for a second, gold and silver, in its simplest definition, it's an insurance policy. You're insuring your financial future against the people that basically corrupt this entire financial system. That's all you're doing. You're basically buying insurance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, it does, you don't have to be a genius to predict the dangers that come with spending money that the government doesn't have over and over and over and over and over again. I'll tell you what makes me the most concerned about all of this stuff is that I think there are a lot of people who would be listening to this podcast, myself included, and I would think you too, that, and I don't know if demoralize is the wrong word, but certainly there is a portion of us in I think all of us who kind of long for the way things used to be, have been demoralized that the traditional values, cultural values are being kind of washed away. And one thing that I'm very concerned about in this environment that you speak of is that, cultural wars, so to speak, what we're seeing right now, where red and blue don't even talk to each other anymore, and the divisiveness that we see becomes even exponentially more dangerous in the midst of a financial or economic collapse. And so I think sides will be drawn, and this is something when you look at what's going on in Colorado and in Maine and the divisiveness that we're seeing all around us. Unfortunately, if people look at America as a country that has always done well with its back against the wall, and that's true, but we've been united. And I think we're maybe more divided than we ever have been. It's going to be a big test. So I want to be very, very clear about this. Yeah, what you're talking about, what your cycles are talking about, and I agree with it, is that we are witnessing an end of an era, an end of a empire, if you will, the transition that is involved in that. And the question is it something that was peaceful, like we saw when we saw the transition from, and relatively peaceful, let's say, as we saw the transition from the pound sterling to the dollar, or is it something going to be anything but that? And I think when you look at the leverage and um, the amount of dollars that are out there in the system around the world. This I don't see as being something that will be orderly and uh, smooth. I think this will be a very challenging time for everyone, maybe a religious experience, if you will. And I think it's time for people to wake up and get prepared because if your charts are right, this is not going to be something that will be very pleasant. This is we've for 50 years plus we've lived arguably beyond our means, largely because of the good graces of our foreign creditors who are now joining a group coalescing against the West and the Western hegemony, and it's coming. And I think that if your charts are correct, it's probably coming a lot quicker than most people would ever give it credit for happening. I happen to believe we've been living on borrowed time for quite some time, so I give a lot of credibility to these charts. But yeah, I think this is very important. And like I said at the onset, I am very much looking forward to running shotgun with you and talking about this through 2024 because I think, these are going to be, as the Chinese curse says, very, 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 very interesting times. And according to your charts, they're here.
To me, the political events are less important. And again, like I read in my cycles, we are not living in political times. I look at all of this as biblical times. You got to admit, I don't care who you are in this world. When 2020 hit January, our world changed forever. Corona changed everything. And you moved to Florida. Like everything we know changed. Look at all the riots that hit 5 months later after the George Floyd event. Okay. When the George Floyd event happened, immediately after that, we saw worldwide rioting. And I've gone through the list before, but there's just like a list of like 100 things rioting all over the globe that has happened, right? And so now we are at another biblical moment in time. It's a third seal. This is a seal in Revelation that basically there's a black horse which represents death, and the rider's got scales in his hands. And the crazy part, when I do the calculations, all I know is that from the calculations, which I can show you here, mathematically, the Daniel cycle of time from the George Floyd riots here at the end of May in 2020, it ended here in the week of this week, December 26th, 27th. So the 1260 cycle's over. So these 3.5 year increments or 1260 days, Annie, they represent a consciousness of how we perceive things. So this consciousness was all from George Floyd riots to here was literally flat on evil. So when the cycle ends, the psychology ends, if that makes sense. And the chart I just showed you, the psychology of a market, is basically screaming the end of an era, the midnight hour. The midnight hour would be the change from one psychology of an up cycle to a down cycle. So if the markets are plunging in 2024, what's going on in the world? What is that? That's the big question. What's going on in the world? But all I know is when you understand timing and then scriptures, you put it all together. Midnight hour is, from our perspective, our midnight hour ends on the 31st of December and starts on the January 1. So there's the midnight hour. So what does that mean? I don't know, but I do expect a massive shaking is going to come across the world. I do expect we're going to have a third seal event manifest. The third seal is the flipping of the financial scales. The prophetic word of Kim Clement also was very clear. He stated that they will bring this nation to its knees. Well, wouldn't that sound like the dollar losing its status as the world reserve currency? right?
Yes.
Wouldn't it sound like that? Because if the U.S. falls to its knees, means that the brothers of Goliath are now victorious. The U.S. is on its knees. And if the U.S. is on its knees, guess what's coming out? All the truths, everything that they've been hiding because the dollars, people are not going to accept it as payment. And then the prophecy finishes with this. And then you will hear the sound of great victory. And why? Because it comes back down to covenant, right? God's got a covenant with the United States. You may not know this, but Israel is a covenant nation, and so is the United States. They wanted to grab the United States, and look what they did. And the moment they grabbed the United States, they started signing everything left, right, and center they could possibly sign to basically trying to destroy the Constitution, unwind everything that could basically prevent them from getting to their goals. Okay. So all of this was in their plans. And now we're basically at a moment in time where we're watching something historic about to go down. These are not political, they're biblical times. This chart here is literally screaming, watch the first week of January. The cycle calculations are screaming this cycle ended, as it's illustrating here in this death run here to the upside, and the markets are turning down today, Friday, as we're speaking. And all I know is in a few days from now, literally in 2 days from now, is the midnight hour. So how this all plays out, God knows, not me, but I know for a fact that I kept hearing midnight hour, midnight hour, midnight hour. I kept hearing that over and over and over again. And then I, got privy to pulling up and comparing the chart patterns, how would I have known to do this? So what I'm trying to say, Andy, and I appreciate you being here, because what I'm trying to show the world is this is the midnight hour where we could see historic flip of historic change. And so I wanted to get your insight onto and into the BRICS events that that are about to manifest here.
So so there's been a lot of things that have happened with the BRICS since we've talked, even, and I'll just go through a few of them.
Please do.
First of all, I'd say, and I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think you could argue that the hegemony of the United States is ending both in three different ways: financially, militarily, and economically. And I think you could add to that the countries don't respect us anymore. Just look at the goofballs that we have as the president and the vice president. You don't have to go any further than that. Iraq has formally announced that they plan to end the presence of the United States-led coalition forces. They want them out of their country. They've also told the BRICS nations that they would like to join BRICS, especially if they were invited. We have also heard recently that Iran and Russia have agreed to trade in local currencies instead of U.S. dollars. And in fact, that Russia has said they will no longer take dollars for any of their energy-based resources. And I think that's a very, very, very big deal. It will no longer accept U.S. dollars for payment for its energy, but instead will switch to Chinese and the United Arab Emirates, I guess you call it, Emirati currencies. And we've already seen this year, 20% of global oil was transacted in other currencies. I expect that to greatly increase.
Compare the difference with like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. Remember, they came against the US dollar and they try to sell oil in other currencies. And that's one issue. Now, look at this, compare this scenario about a global conglomerate coming to do the exact same thing.
Well, it's interesting. We talked on our last podcast that the United Arab Emirates came out and made the very provocative statement. And this was done 2 days before they had 200 countries or delegates from 200 countries in Dubai for the United Nations Summit on Climate Control. They said, we're not going to take dollars for oil anymore. And to your point, when Gaddafi and Hussein made that, they were taken over and their regimes toppled. Well, I found it to be very, very interesting that not only the timing of this announcement, 2 days before you have 200 countries represented in your country, but, this is the seventh largest producer of oil in the world. They're an OPEC country. They were just admitted to BRICS right alongside of Saudi Arabia. And the most interesting part of it all was how Putin, who hasn't left the country but once or twice in 2 years, flew to the Emirates, to Dubai, flanked by 4 Russian MiG jets, to have a discussion right after this announcement is made. I mean, what was that coincidental? I don't
Right.
think so. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the end of the petrodollar is upon us. But look, a lot of people talk about the fact that there hasn't been announced a shared currency yet, a common settlement currency. By all accounts, there's a high probability we'll see something along those lines in October in the new meeting in Russia. Russia takes over as the president this year for the BRICS nations. It rotates each year. It went from South Africa, now it will go to Russia. They will be running the BRICS in 2024. They will have the meeting in 2024. They told us at the end of the meeting in Johannesburg that their finance ministers were tasked with going back to the drawing board, coming back next year in Russia with plans on uniting a common settlement currency. But I would argue that they don't even necessarily need to have a shared BRICS currency to chip away at the dollar. All they need to do, the BRICS and the BRICS Plus, and remember, you got 20 countries that have applied formally and another 20 that have informally applied or more. All they need to do right now is to demand that each member pay each other in local currencies in order to trade with them. And that will very, very quickly start to chip away at the settlement value of the dollar, which ultimately betrays the reserve status of the dollar. And I think at some point very soon, the dollar will lose value very rapidly and it'll be treated like a hot potato. And I think we are caught between a rock and a hard place. And this is exactly why you're seeing this growing and rapidly growing ascension of these countries, because they realize not only are we weak from a political standpoint, and maybe even a military standpoint, where the Congressional Budget Office, branch of the U.S. government, has publicly said that in 7 years, by 2031, 100% of all the tax revenue taken in will go just to pay the interest on the debt and the mandatory entitlements programs like Social Security. But imagine, how do we remain the world reserve and the center of free trade, the powerful military and economic powerhouse that we've been for all these years, when 100% of all the discretionary spending, including military, will have to be borrowed by these same people that are moving against us? So it's a situation that I think is, as you eloquently have shown, is coming to the 12th hour. And you could argue we're there, and we're very, very close to it, certainly. When you add into it that January 1st, all of these new 5 countries, including the United Arab Emirates, including Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, who's incredibly resource rich in all of the materials needed for rare earths, as an example, fastest growing economy in Africa, Egypt you have on that list as well, and Iran, you're putting together in terms of their geographic location, Suez Canal and whatnot, and also their natural resources. You're looking at a growing group of countries that will control the majority of all of the world's commodities, the majority of the world's oil and natural gas and rare earth minerals that are needed, and metals that are needed in order to fund a green infrastructure. None of this has been thought out very well. And I think the fact that we are arguably at our weakest in terms of our unity as a country, in terms of our political divisiveness, in terms of our financial standing, where, we have to borrow money just to keep the lights on and pay the interest on the debt. This is something that will end badly. And I think the people across the globe, these BRICS nations that are, as you say, will stand in glee at our demise, they realize that we are right there. It won't take much to push it over the edge. And they're doing that right now, little by little by little. I call it logarithmic decay, with all of these deals that are being settled, not in dollars any longer. And 20% of the world's oil production was not settled in dollars this year. And I think that will be a trend that is growing and growing. It used to be nearly 100%. So yeah, this is something that, I think everything that I have talked about for 3 years is converging on a prophetic side and on a analytic side with your charts. They're all converging. And so, I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know when the switch is flipped, but I can tell you that everything in my heart and soul tells me that this is not being done coincidentally. This is being done in a very methodical way, And that's the difference between the rest of the world and us. And we have this bad habit of instant gratification not being fast enough. And these countries that are doing it the right way, establishing a framework, one that is very legitimate in terms of its GDP, in terms of its military might, in terms of its natural resources, in terms of its global population, where if done correctly, we're in big trouble. And I think that's exactly what your charts are showing. And it's no fun being the bearer of bad news, but I would rather know what's coming, be able to make appropriate steps, get out of the way of what's coming, and not just survive, maybe even thrive a little bit in an environment where if you don't see what's coming and you don't get out of the way, you get run over. And I really do think that that is what is the fate of the majority of even the very affluent people in this country who don't realize the severity of what it would mean to lose the petrodollar status and what it would do to all of the assets in this country that make people feel safe and secure. That's the target. And I think it's never been more important. I guess I'd say it this way: unconventional times call for unconventional thought and action, and this is one of those times.
Thanks, Andy. A great place to end this would be I want to throw a few scriptures at you and also give you to understand how the prophetic and scriptures are literally lining up and tying in the events of the world. Okay, so when you read Leviticus, thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land. Okay, so liberty throughout the land on when? The 50th year. Okay, so now let's look at some critical events. When you understand that one scripture, you're going to now go to abortion. Okay, so abortion, Roe v. Wade was first argued in Supreme Court in 71, but became law January 22nd, 73. So this is the 50th year. So Leviticus is telling us we are to proclaim liberty throughout the land in this year, 50th year. And also it's 8 cycles of 50 since harvest, the first harvest in 1623. So we're 400 years since the first harvest, which was just last month, 400 years ago. So we got abortion was overturned last year. Now we go further, we delve deeper into this. So basically, this January 21st will be the end of the 50th year, and the 51st year starts on January 22nd. So, in other words, Leviticus is saying that something needs to happen before January 21. That's what Leviticus is telling us. Now, when you go further into this, well, we got Nixon and the petrodollar. That was in 71, no different than abortion being first argued in the Supreme Court, but it wasn't until Kissinger, right, 73, and then it was a transactional instrument, I guess, as of 74. So Kissinger, he died at 50 years to the creation of his baby. So what a coincidence that happened. We also had the Tabernacle War, which was 50 years to the exact time point of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So you got 50 years confirmation. You got 50-year confirmation with the petrodollar and a double confirmation with the death of Kissinger. Like now we're like confirmation upon confirmation upon confirmation. And then the other part that is you got the World Economic Forum. They founded in 71, but it was in 73 they published a Davos Manifesto, which was what? Their plans, what they're doing right now. So all I'm telling you is that none of this is by coincidence.
That's why I call it spooky, Bo. I mean, it's spooky. I mean, it is. And, if you have an analytical mind and you're new to this type of thing, like I am, it's spooky, but it resonates with me. All the things that you have said, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't. I think
there's something that's written, Andy. It says, when you hear the truth, you know it.
Yeah, well, I do, and it resonates with me very, very, very sincerely. It does on not only the charts but also these patterns that we keep seeing, and it's kind of like people, talk about luck. Well, I've always agreed with the old adage that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. Well, the same thing is true here. I mean, is it coincidence or is it something much bigger that we just happen to have noticed? And
right,
or you happen to have noticed.
From a biblical perspective, coincidences are nothing but by design. There's a prophecy of Daniel's 2,500 years old. It's the greatest prophecy ever written, and it stands to date. Every kingdom has existed: Babylon, Persia, Greece, like all of this, except the last part. While you're watching, so we get to watch this. A stone carved up by no human hand comes and destroys, takes down Babylon. So something's afoot. Second Chronicles states very clearly, if my children who are called by my name humble themselves, pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. So what was the wicked thing we were doing? Killing the creator's creation. And so that's why we're in this mess after 50 years. But we turn from our wicked ways. We've overturned Roe v. Wade as a nation. And so how awesome is this? Because it's an if-then statement. Then we will hear from heaven. God will forgive our sins and do what? Heal our land. So this is the midnight hour. I'm just telling you, something's afoot. No one knows the exact day, the exact hour this is going to go down. Okay. Andy feels it in his bones. We're like, something's crazy, is going on in the world. And on the charts right now are screaming to me, something big's about to happen as well, too. And then what I just got the revelation is midnight hour, midnight hour, midnight hour. So what does it all mean? I guess we're all going to find out together. Okay. But I do appreciate you being here, Andy. People want to reach you. People want to buy some precious metals. How do they do it? Where do they start?
The best way to do it, to get white glove service and to request a price list that is much more, let's call it, favorable than the prices that we have on our website, would be info@Miles Franklin, and let them know that Bo sent us, and we will answer any questions at all related to the things we've talked about here, to just giving you a price list if that's what you want, a really competitive, super competitive one. Or diving deep into things associated with metals like IRAs or storage, or just talking economics. All of our brokers are very, very, very sophisticated, accomplished careers even before they came here. Many of them on Wall Street and whatnot, and we would just love the opportunity to have a conversation, because I think relationships are really important in life. I think it's easy to forget that in this digital world we live in. But I think when things get interesting, as we say they're going to be, these are interesting times. Relationships will be very, very important, and we love the opportunity to make them, and are very grateful for the opportunity to be here with you and to talk with your people.
Thanks, Andy. I think this is to you, to your family, to everybody paying attention to this interview. Please share, like this interview. I'm telling you, get this email out immediately to everybody you possibly know. Something is afoot. Something big is about to manifest on our world and in our world right now. So, this was an emergency podcast, and more importantly, you wanted to finish out the year, and what a blessing to finish it out with Andy as well, too. So have a fantastic, fantastic New Year's, everybody, and be safe no matter what happens. It could get very scary. Something could happen. It could be scary. Okay. If this is a biblical intervention, the ground could shake. We could see a lot of earthly movement. This could happen. I don't know, but I'm just telling you, at the end of this, it's going to be a fantastic turnaround of events. So prophecy was and is, they will bring this nation to its knees, but then we will hear the sound of great victory. Okay, so regardless of however ugly it looks, potentially maybe now or in the near future, whatever goes down, know that there is God the Father is in charge. And we just want to tell you that if you're going to do something with your personal finances, be wise about it.
And I do want to thank you as well, Bo. And I want to tell you one more time, and everyone else out there, I've done going on 1,400 podcasts in the last 4 years, all of them, most of them on other people's shows. Most of the time, I'm the one that's doing the majority of the talking. And I will tell you with great sincerity that there are very few podcasts that are people that I've met that have really opened my eyes to something, to it helps put the pieces together. And I'm honored to be here. And like I said earlier, I am really relishing the opportunity to ride shotgun with you in what I think will be a crazy year, and try and put the pieces together with your great insightfulness. And I just thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to picking up where we left off in 2024. And like you said, I wish you and everyone else out there a very happy and healthy new year. And I think it's time to buckle up. I think it's going to be one of those years to remember. So from the bottom of my heart, Bo, thank you for the friendship. and the opportunity to talk with you. I look forward to doing it again real soon.
BRICS nations have the oil, they have their natural resources. They don't have to put up with it, and they're not going to put up with it. And remember, 2/3 of those hombres are not buddies, not friends of this constitutional republic we have. They're our enemies or rubbing up on our enemies.
The smart people, the ones that are paying attention, are already converting their debt money into good money, gold and silver. I mean, that's what the global central banks are doing. First half of this year, they bought more gold ever in history. Gee, why are they doing that? Who knows more about money than the central banks?
What's going to happen? How long can we keep this up, Andy? How long can people keep taking this piece of garbage here that we print at will?
I don't think much longer at all. I mean, look, just in this year alone, the BRICS countries have offloaded $123 billion in U.S. treasuries. China and Brazil and India, the United Arab Emirates, all of our supposed allies of the past, well, minus China, although we had a good relationship with them for a long time, they're dumping the bonds. And there are countries that are working very hard to strike deals with one another outside the dollar. And as we continue to print at a pace that is unsustainable, while rates are going higher, we are putting such strain on the entire system. The whole system's going to be dragged down. And maybe that's what they're intending to do. But maybe that's why, and it's not just the wealthiest traders in the world, that being the central banks, it's the most sophisticated and well-informed, continue to buy gold at a pace that the world has never seen over the last 18 months, more than they have ever seen. And every month, it's bigger than the last. They know what's coming. And this is a very big deal, and it must be done methodically, not too quick to cut off your nose to spite your face. But there will come a point, and I call it logarithmic decay, little by little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once. It's like going over the falls. Well, we're seeing the little by little by little by little by little. Every interview that you and I have done, we've talked more about the little by little by little by little by little. Where are we in this logarithmic decay where we hit the falls? Don't know, but we will hit that. And I think that's what you're so good at showing people, is the little by little by little by little. And when the all at once comes, when none of us know, when it probably on a Sunday night, if you're not prepared, not just with gold and silver, in every way, I think it's going to be a very, let's call it a religious experience, and one that I don't think will be very pleasant for the majority of the people who don't see what's coming and therefore have not and cannot get out of the way.
Last question, about 30 seconds. What's CBDC going to do when the Fed goes to the Fed coin? What happens then?
Well, I think in order to get to the CBDC, you have to create an event. And that event could be the loss of the petrodollar and everyone dumping dollars, which creates hyperinflation. As the dollars hit our shores and inflation goes straight up and interest rates go straight up to compensate, not controlled by the Fed, but by the market, and everything collapses. But have no fear. Lael Brainerd and her central bank digital currency, the #2 economic advisor to the U.S. White House, modern monetary theorist who ran point on Fed Now and also worked with MIT in establishing the CBDC. I think you will create an event where people will beg for it because they will have watched the banking system implode. CBDCs will be the end of privacy and will be the ability for the Federal Reserve to create both monetary and fiscal policy right to the end user. And it's what they want, and it is coming. And the Bank of International Settlement said every country must have an operational one by 2025. It's coming. And I think that's another thing to be prepared for. Get out of the matrix. Own things that have no counterparty risk, like gold and silver.
That's why I own this. This is silver and gold.
Yeah, there'll come a time where they'll say, you got 90 days to turn this in. And if you don't, it's worthless. And now you get your new CBDC. When does that happen? Don't know. How does it happen? I don't know. But they will have an event that makes people want to take it. Because the majority of the people that I talk to and listen to you, they don't want to take it unless they have no choice. And that event, the banking system blowing up, everything blowing up, here, will make you whole. Just sign on the dotted line.
Of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world. You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war. I think if it doesn't, look, we are already reverting to third world status in many ways. You look at our airports, you look at our terminals, you look at our filthy roads and broken roads and everything else. We're like a third world country. We have something that's very powerful, and that's our dollar all over. But you take a look at what's happening to it now with other countries not using it. And you know China wants to replace it with the yuan. And it was unthinkable with us. Unthinkable. Would never have happened. Now people are thinking about it. That could happen.